Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Writers and Authors Show. We do this every second Wednesday with our friends over at Books Forward. And if you don't know them yet, I encourage you to go to their website, booksforward.com. We have been working with them and their authors for over 2 decades. I think even back in the day when Nancy and I were in print, running around in print. So we've been going for 26 years. So I think, definitely been with them for a long time. And why we like working with them is they really know good authors. And today we have an amazing author joining us, Lyn Squire. He is the author of the Dunston Burnett Trilogy. And his first novel is coming out in this trilogy, September 26, 2023, through a Level Best Books. It's called Immortalised to Death. So September 26th is the day. So you can go to his website, lynsquiremysteries.com. And that's Lyn, Lyn. And we love it. Lyn is from Wales, which is so cool. We rarely get to chat with people from Wales. We do a lot in England, Scotland, but finally we get to talk with someone from Wales. And you're going to enjoy this conversation because it does delve into the death of Charles Dickens. And it's one of those good old-fashioned mysteries. If you love a good whodunit, this is going to be for you. So welcome to the show, Lyn. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Lisa. And let me just say thank you so much for having me on Big Blend Radio.
Oh, we're excited about this. You know, Nancy's reading and she's terrible. Like she's not allowed. We have to watch her because she always wants to tell everybody everything. And she does that to me. And I'm like, I'm trying to read the book. Don't ruin it for me. No, but did you know? And your book is definitely this way. And I'm so excited that you bring up Charles Dickens. We all know him, right? But I want to just go there. I want to start there because I want people to kind of remember who Charles Dickens was. And he's so famous in so many of his writings. But you start at his death, which even at the beginning of the book, when even, just everybody he's writing away. Like, his pen is flowing over, and doing his thing, but he was really dead. What inspired you to focus on him?
Well, I'll give you 2 answers to this. One is, let me say a few words about Dickens, because obviously he features prominently in my story. But then let me go to in fact, kind of a singular event which inspired me to write the book, Immortalised to Death. What do we know about Dickens? Well, this man was, in 58 years of life on this earth, wrote some of the most incredible books, most incredible stories ever. They were sprawling. They went all over the place. And of course, he introduced some of the most famous characters ever. Just think of Fagin or the Artful Dodger. They're names that we use in general conversation to this day. I've actually read, I think, all of his novels.
Wow.
And I think he has great characters that really drive his stories. If you think of the first one he wrote, this was the Pickwick Papers. This story actually doesn't have a plot. It's just a series of events about these characters, the people in the Pickwick Club, and the troubles they get into. It's humorous, it's funny, it's a different adventure or misadventure each month. He moved on from that to beginning to have more structure to his stories. And by time he got to, Dombey and Son, which was published in 1848, he was actually preparing notes for his books. And the little point I want to get in here is that the notes that he'd prepared for The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later, stopped at installment 6. This was the 6th installment in what was supposed to be 12. So just keep that in your mind. He died halfway through this novel. Let me just say one word about installments, because in those days, this was late 19th century in England, the books came out in monthly issues. They appeared in a magazine. Every 30 days, Dickens had to produce like 4 or 5 chapters to make an installment for this magazine. I cannot imagine the pressure he was under to fulfill this contract of producing right on the 30th day 4 or 5 chapters ready to go to the publisher. But he did it. And
wow.
The reason he did it, I think, is because he was such a natural and gifted writer. He could sit down and write stuff, and pages and pages. He would come out of his study and he would say to Georgina, who was kind of his housekeeper, and his sister-in-law, actually, he would come out and say, I've just written furiously for 4 or 5 hours. And that was what he could do. If you take me, I'm a slugger. If I write 500 words in a day, I think I've done extraordinarily well. And then I have to go back and redo them because they weren't right. Dickens just wrote. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, I love that. I want to just say the 2 things. You're talking about the installments and then him writing these chapters like this. And I know with Georgina, she's like, he either does his lunch and then he comes in later, like he's either, and he was dead at that point when he one day didn't come up for lunch. But these installments, like, I think it's fascinating that you chose to do a trilogy, right? So it's kind of harking back to that. And obviously your character took over things, like you got attached to the character, which is so British. Sorry, Wales is Walesish or British. It's like the character.
British is fine, I assure you.
Yeah. The character is such a key role. So I find that fascinating that you've done that. Like you're in that zone where I think with all this fast paced kind of literature and movies and everything, I like that we're getting a little bit more independent. And, I know as we're recording this, there's like a writer's strike and everything, but I think the things that do really well are when people identify with the character. You can put that character through anything. It's about the character. The story is like almost like the secondary thing. It's about who that person is because people want to identify. So do you think you kind of were inspired by Dickens for your own writing and then deciding, okay, here's my character, here's my detective, and then here is also this trilogy because I'm not going to do just one novel?
Well, I do think character is important. And if I may say a few words about the protagonist in the trilogy, his name is Dunston Burnett. And I wanted to have a character. He's like sort of the amateur detective in these mysteries.
We love those, yeah.
And but I wanted an amateur detective who was certainly not the wonderful classic sleuth like Sherlock Holmes, who had these terrific powers of observation and made these wonderful deductions, which incidentally always proved to be right. But that's another story. I didn't want that, nor did I want the tough guy, private eye sort of detective, say someone like Sam Spade. So the more I thought about it, the more I felt, for me, the right kind of person was someone who was maybe slightly diffident, middle-aged. In fact, I ended up in saying that this man, Dunston Burnett, was a retired bookkeeper. So you can't get much further away from sort of detective material than this man. But I gave to his character 2 talents. One is he had this ability to connect dots. Okay, well, other detectives have that. But Dunston not only connected the dots which were already there, he sort of visualized or made up a few extra dots and put them into the mix as well. Now, the consequence of this is that when he said, I think this is what happened, chances are he's wrong. He could be wrong. He could be right. Holmes was never, never wrong. So anyway, he had this ability, this talent to kind of visualize what might have happened, even if it was not based soundly in fact. The other is, once he'd fixed onto an idea, he was very, very tenacious. And he would pursue it like, he would, with all the determination and tenacity that you can imagine. So the idea running through this trilogy is that we have this man who is hardly an obvious candidate to be a detective, who faces a series of what seem like unsolvable crimes. It's that tension which plays out in Immortalised to Death, but then is carried through into the other two stories in this trilogy. So in a way, that character, his sort of his deficiencies as a detective, but the one or two talents that he has, that carries all the way through the trilogy.
I love it because it's that rabbit hole. We talk about this on our shows all the time, the rabbit holes. You can't pull out. Like once you're in it, it's like an obsession, right? And everybody has something that they're fascinated by, but when you start, and it's, in this country, we have the conspiracy theories, right?
Oh, yes.
Politics. We won't go there, but, we won't go to politics. God, no. But when you think about it, once something gets you and you've been bitten by the bug, so to speak, right? It's like a song those earworm songs that you can't get out of your head.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's the same thing for him. Like he's maybe amateur, but if you've got a taste of, you think something and even everybody's going, no, you're going to go for it. You're going to do it because you can't hold back. It gets under your skin,
Yeah, indeed. I think by the time I've completed this trilogy, and the first book is coming out soon, the second one about this time next year, and the third in 2025. I think by the time I've done that trilogy, I'll probably be ready to move on to, some new character, which I haven't even thought of yet. But I want to wait and see what kind of reaction I get to these books. If it's very positive, then yes, indeed, I will probably consider a new character, a new set of stories. If these three books prove to be duds, which I hope that doesn't happen.
Oh, no way.
But I'm going to take up golf.
No. No, golf is fine. I'm not going against golf, but no, because I love your writing. You give us space to breathe. I talk about that in music and books, where because Charles, and I really wanted to talk about Charles Dickens because there's a fear of even getting into it because of the language being too much, from older times.
Right.
And your book allows us to breathe and actually get through that and understand who he is. And then that era, that time frame, and the setting of Kent, and I feel like sometimes it's like people who would really be interested and want to read him have that fear of, oh, it's going to be like Shakespeare. I can't get into it, and Shakespeare is brilliant, right?
Yeah.
But it's a hard
It's hard.
It's hard. And
Yeah.
so when authors like you bring something to life, a person like that to life, you're carrying this torch. And I think even what you're doing is through having a trilogy is carrying a torch, and you're carrying the torch for a good old mystery. The whodunits are like, so we all want to know. I think that's the most things, people watch that stuff on TV all the time. I'd like to see this be up on the screen too. Would you be against that, or do you want it to just be? Come on, we had Agatha Christie on TV, and then we had Murder She Wrote. Come on, you've got to have liked Murder She Wrote, right?
Well, you're talking about shows which I watched and loved for sure. Let me just say a word on how people get involved with mysteries, and in particular how they might be involved with the mystery of Edwin Drood, which is the Dickens story, which features in my novel. This is the one that Dickens was writing when he died, so he's only finished it. And I think that anyone who reads that first half of that story, and it's fascinating and intriguing, but anyone who reads that first half is almost inevitably driven to try to figure out what happened in the second half. And in fact, there's been a huge industry of authors, researchers, Dickens scholars, and so on, who tried to figure out what happened in the second half of his story. There was a bibliography which came out, I think it was in 1998. It's 600 pages long with over 2,000 attempts. These are all published attempts to solve the mystery of Edwin Drood. And I think that just attests to the interest in mysteries in general, but also in the
Dickens.
Mystery of Edwin Drood. And talking about shows, there was a Broadway musical about the Mystery of Edwin Drood. I think it was in 2012. It was staged in New York. And at the intermission, the audience was asked to come up with their idea of how the story was going to unfold. And then the cast would act that out in the second half of the show. Talking about TV, there was a PBS masterpiece production a few years ago. I think it might have been 2012 as well. And just add one note on this, see how far this kind of interest in the story goes. There was even a one-day academic conference in Senate House in London in 2014. So you've got a bunch of university professors thinking about this story and how it might conclude. That, I think, attests to the interest that these stories generate.
I wonder if anybody did a seance thing and try to get a psychic to call him up and say, what was the end of this? You know what I mean? Like going to that level. I bet someone did.
I'm sure. You know? I'm sure you're right. There was even a mock trial.
No way.
Yep. This was put on by a group of authors, and they tried John Jasper, who's the villainous choir master in the story. They tried him for the murder of Edwin Drood. People go to extraordinary lengths to figure out what happened. So
I love this. And, you know, it fascinates me about even just, there's just these amazing writers that will always make us think. And I think Charles Dickens was one of those. That's part of it, is when you read a really good story and I think the one of the key elements of a mystery, right, other than the character, right, which we've talked about, is the co-creation. I always say this about novels and any book you're reading, you're co-creating because you're having your own vision. You're setting up the character, like the author developed, here's the character, right? Here's their traits. But no matter what, it's your vision in your mind, your picture, right? You're hearing the voices in what you're hearing in your own ears and the own dialects and sound. It's like you're creating a movie when you read a book, right?
Right.
It takes you to all these places. So you're sparking your imagination. And a mystery is like you are the amateur sleuth. You are the amateur.
Exactly.
You are.
Yeah.
And so that's something that makes people think, and in a way that you don't get in school where they're telling you, you must think and do this now and do it by this deadline. And as a kid, you're going, no, I have to. There's a stress with it, you know?
I think that's an interesting point. I mean, if my book does encourage readers to try to use their little gray cells to figure out the solution to the mystery in my book, that's terrific. If it encourages them to think more generally about other mysteries, or even the mystery of Edwin Drood, and try to work out a solution to that, that's fine. But my view has always been that my story is meant to entertain. So it's not really an educational device or anything like that. It really is meant to entertain. And if the reader walks away from reading my book and says, my goodness, I really enjoyed that story, I would be very, very happy. And I think Dickens was the same.
Mm.
You know, he was there to entertain, and his stories are entertaining. If you like humor in books, Dickens had that. If you like drama, Dickens had that. If you like to have your emotions tugged this way and that way, Dickens had that. So well worth reading.
I know this sounds really weird, but I always looked at Charles Dickens and Benjamin Franklin as kind of connected, because Benjamin Franklin, I know there's another guy who's famous for the Farmer's Almanac, but Benjamin Franklin actually started it as a form of entertainment for people to get through the winter.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a comical thing, but people started taking it seriously. But he was writing it as entertainment. And I always felt like, I don't know why I felt they were always connected, but I would like to have the two of them in a conversation. I'd like to be the fly on the wall for that. Wouldn't you think that would be interesting?
That would be great.
The two of them?
You've actually told me something I didn't know. I didn't know that about Benjamin Franklin, but I think that would be absolutely fascinating. You're right.
Yeah, he did some kind of, it was like, if I'm wrong, maybe it was after the guy who did there's one person that's really did the almanac properly, but Benjamin Franklin started stuff, and he was a prolific writer,
Yeah.
you know, but he had humor to him. And I think that's the only way he could get all these countries to talk to each other. I mean, he bebopped around between England, France, and America, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was humor, and having that, and people are always curious of travelers too. They're always like, what, what's going on? And that could work against you, right? Too. But I find it interesting with what you're doing, because I feel like, yes, entertainment, but people may walk away going, God, I haven't heard about Charles Dickens since I was in school. I don't even know if they teach him in school anymore,
Yeah.
I hope so. God, I hope so. But maybe they'll go read that, but I'm fascinating about you going, hey, let me write my first novel as a mystery, because you have to keep people, I think mystery has to be the hardest thing to write, whether, it's crime or just whodunit, like all that has got to be the hardest, because you have to string your reader along to the end and still surprise them and not give it away too. You have to have that balance.
Yeah.
So tell me about that process of decision. Like, I'm going to do this, and not only am I going to do one book, I'm going to do a trilogy and go for it. And how do you know to when it's time to put it out and say, okay, I can string people along till the end?
Yeah.
Like, how did
it's a fascinating question, and I may not be the best person to answer it, because I think my situation is rather peculiar. But let me tell you, when we first started talking, I mentioned about how I said I would talk about how I got into writing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this now gives me the opportunity to do that. Let me just say before I get into it that in my professional career, I was writing sort of academic papers which were published, and books and so on and so forth. So this really, switching to fiction is really a huge change for me. And this is how it happened. And it's almost a single event that occurred. And that event was the purchase of The Mystery of Edwin Drood. At this point, I had no intention of writing anything. I simply was rereading some of the classics, and I picked up this one, and I was going to read it. But as I was saying, everybody who reads it tries to figure out how the story was going to conclude. And when I read it, I came up with what I thought was a clue to the ending, which nobody else has seemed to mention. I told you about all these people who try to solve the mystery and write the ending of the story. So there's a lot of stuff out there. But had I really come up with a clue which no one else had ever seen? So I'd kind of fallen into being interested in writing, or excuse me, writing rather, but in the mystery of Edwin Drood itself. And so what I did was to write up my clue as a short article I knew how to write articles. I knew how to get them published and stuff like that. And I sent it off to a thing called the Dickensian, which is published by the University of Kent. And I knew they would look at this very carefully. It would be subject to scrutiny by all the top Dickensian scholars in the UK. Well, scrutiny complete. They liked it. They said it was an original contribution to the debate about Dickens' story, and they published in one of the issues. So at this point, I still haven't started writing fiction. I've written a note, if you like, with the evidence for my clue. But once I had that, then I began to think, this really opens up some different solutions to the story.
Cool.
Anything else that might have been written or thought about. So then I moved on to thinking about a solution to this whole story based on my clue. And I thought more about it. And again, I was thought, well, maybe I'll just write up my solution, send it back to the Dickensian as an article, and that'll be it. But it was from that point that it grew into a novel. So, as I say, I'm probably a bit peculiar in a way because I fell into writing a novel as a result of that purchase of one book, The Mystery of Edwin Drood.
Wow. It's amazing because you're going from articles. I think there's, because writing articles, it follows that formula of a press release, right? Here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's, we've got that formula, and the formula is true even for a book, right?
Yeah.
And if you know how to, you have to sell it fast in an article, right? In a one-page press release, you have to have that technique to make that successful. And it's the same in the book. You just, because, and it's the same in a mystery, because you have to have that movement of, you want to turn the page, and you're on that journey. But like a mystery, you read fast. Mysteries are the ones that keep you up at night. You are all responsible, all of you mystery writers, for so many people losing sleep. It's not funny. And I think it's a brilliant thing, because if I can say brilliant because you're from Wales.
Yeah, absolutely.
but that's the thing. You want that adventure. I think as we age, and if we stayed up all night reading a book, we're like, hey, that's it. I'm going to get up at 2 a.m. and I'm going to pour myself a glass of wine and finish this book.
Yeah.
And I may have a bar of chocolate at that time, a little dark chocolate, because I'm old enough to do it, and I will. And then I'll be, shattered the next day. And I can use that word too, because it's from Wales, but it doesn't matter, because that's my adventure now. And really, reading books, it is an event. And once you're hooked into it, it's like that rabbit hole, that earworm. You're in it. And that next morning, you get upset because you finished it. It was beautiful. You knew it was that adventure. And then literally you do want to swear at the author because you're tired. And you did it to us.
Yeah.
And you want that effect on people, right?
Well, I got so interested in Dickens that I actually went on one of my trips back to the UK. I went to Gad's Hill Place, which was his home in Kent. And it's still very much like it was in 1870 when he was living there. And to make my story as realistic as possible, I went and I stood in his study, which is where the murder in my story takes place. So,
wow.
It was right there.
Were you allowed to take photos and everything for your?
Oh yeah, it's actually now open to the public, I believe, during the summer holidays. But I think it's a girls' school for part of the year. But it's only an hour's train ride from London, so it's easy to get to.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I went out of the front door, down the drive, crossed Gravesend Road, and into the Falstaff Inn, which is a pub that's been there since, 16th century or whatever. And it's another place where I set an incident in my story. So I had a a beer and I saw the pub, and I felt after my day's trip, I really had the background and the feel of the place to be able to really put this down in the story and convey it to the reader.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, isn't that research part like exciting? You know, I mean, when you write things and you have those moments of like aha moments, right? And you've actually been to a study like that, to me, I would find it very hard to go to sleep that night. Do you have that, like, where you will stay up all night, or like, I mean, don't you get like a little crazy in a good way? You know, when you have those moments and those aha, and then it's like, put it off, or do I write it now? And it doesn't matter. I mean, that's kind of a hard thing in the creative process.
Well, I was telling you earlier that I'm not a fast writer. You know, as I said, if I do 500 pages in a day, I'm very, very happy. That does not mean that I do not think, as to my negatives there maybe, but I actually spend the rest of the day thinking about the story. In a way, I may do an hour of writing, but it's 23 hours of thinking about
it. Right. You know, that's it. Like, I'll be on an article. I've been formalizing it in my head. I'm very similar to you on that. And then Nancy will ask me a question and I'll answer her from what I'm writing in my head. And she goes, that makes no sense. And I'm like, oh, I know. But like, now it's out and I have to go write it down now because I'm going to lose it because it's out of my head. Well, like, as soon as you open your mouth, it starts to release, you know. Yeah, you can't.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think of things when I'm asleep or partly asleep. I get up the next morning, I have a sentence or two sentences or a paragraph. I can go down, I can write those in to what I was working on the previous day. I can write them in immediately. So I find my time not writing is perhaps better spent in a way than my time spent writing.
It's obsessive. It is. It is just like doing a mystery, right? Yeah. It's obsessive. I mean, I find it so fascinating how every author is different. Some authors I have to write from 5 to here.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Dickens was like that. And, I go to a coffee shop. Like, to me, that would be annoying. I don't want to be around people. I want to be in my pajamas looking at nature with dogs. Okay. Like, I don't want to be around people. I want coffee. You know, I don't, you know, and maybe sometimes some great music, and other people don't want music. Everybody's different. Now, what about music for you? I should ask you that. Yeah. Any music come to mind for this? And do you write with music?
I tell you,
yeah.
I have some old rock and roll music that I like, and I do play it when I write.
So you're moving your fingers with it, so you get into a rhythm and it makes you flow.
I wish. No.
Oh, okay.
I'm nodding my head and I'm thinking, but I'm not writing.
I want to know. Okay, what's on the rock and roll? What's on your playlist? I want to know. I'm such a music person.
This is really odd, but there was a time in the UK when this was long after Buddy Holly's death, but there's a time in the UK when Buddy Holly was like a cult hero almost. You may know that there was a musical about him in the UK. It got a lot of attention, and I think I've seen that musical twice, maybe at least twice. And Buddy Holly and his music, that's one that I play a lot.
Oh, now have you been to Lubbock, Texas?
No, I haven't.
That's his birthplace.
Yeah,
now, we go to Lubbock about 2-3 times a year, and he's got his own park. He's got a museum and a park plaza that his parents put together. And they've got a giant, after this, I'm sending you photos of it because it's amazing. He's got giant sunglasses, and we went during the pandemic, unfortunately, so we couldn't go in and everything, but let's get the outside. But he has his own plaza, and they have music concerts in the plaza. And we just came through Mason City, Iowa, which is near Clear Lake, which is where Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens crashed. And so they played the Surf Ballroom, which was the last concert out there. But I haven't walked to the site because every time, and we we're on this writing project of this Jefferson Highway. It's a historic highway that was started in 1915 that goes from Winnipeg, Canada, down to New Orleans, and it's a revival of it. And Mason City, the Music Man himself comes from there, Iowa, and we've done shows on this. And every time we try to get near there, like something detours us, but we have to go and stay there because they also have the original and only Frank Lloyd Wright hotel that was designed by him in the world there, still standing.
Well, here's a piece of it. Sorry.
Yeah, I have to go there.
I was just going to add on Frank Lloyd Wright. He has a Welsh heritage. I hope you know that.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I've been on part of his trail in Wisconsin and everything. Come on.
I'm not sure whether he was sort of born over in Wales or whether, it was his parents, but he certainly has a Welsh connection. My wife absolutely loves his houses. We have to visit them wherever we go. She's, she just thinks they're amazing.
His design, because it goes into nature, right? Well, Let's talk about some Welsh heritage. You do have some famous people from Wales, and Wales is small, but you have Roald Dahl, and I think he is one of the best. Seriously, Jungle Book and everything. Come on.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Obviously.
And he was just, I almost look at him as a philosopher in a way.
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I'm trying to think of the other author that I really, really like. Well, his name escapes me right now. But we do produce one or two people who make their mark on the world, and he was certainly one.
And you're going to be the next one now. Your book's coming out. So everyone, September 26th, Immortalised to Death is coming out then, but you can pre-order it. Remember that. Authors love that. It really helps. And writing, you may read the book overnight because you get excited about it and have your wine and chocolate at the end or not. Everyone's different. But so much blood, sweat, and tears goes into a book. So pre-ordering, whatever we can do to help authors, do that where you can. And Lyn's website is lynsquiremysteries.com. And that's LYN. And then squiremysteries.com. Check it out there. And of course, Books Forward is booksforward.com, and we're bigblendradio.com. We want to thank all of you for listening today. And thank you so much, Lyn. It has been a pleasure having you on the show talking about your Dunston Burnett trilogy. And we can't wait for part 2. And, you've got to keep going because there's a lot. It's fantastic. We love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And, do tell your mother, I hope she likes the book.
She does. She needs to not tell me about it. She's really, just about every author that's been on the show knows this. She will go, so-and-so just did this. And I'm like, you're not supposed to tell me this. I'm not there yet. Well, this is amazing. And honestly, we travel full time. So her Kindle light is on. I'm like, can you no. She's like the kid with the flashlight or a torch, as you may say, with a tent in her bedroom. That's who she is. Like, she's one of those. She will stay up reading people's books all night. And then I have to say, we have to work. She goes, I don't care. I'm finishing this. So anyway, you're one of those books. So, she loves your writing. She just, the first thing she said, this man can write. I love it. So, and I just love that you brought Charles. I know you're saying all these people, and I love that. I want people and writers like Charles Dickens to forever be immortalized, right?
Absolutely.
Good title. Thank you so much, Lyn. You take care and keep writing.
Will do. Thank you, Lisa.